Hey, welcome to the Netivot Shalom Shir. We're going to take the portion tonight from Parsha Vaeyra of Davidovich Shel Geula, the four language that is used in the Torah for redemption. And before we start looking at the actual Netivot Shalom, I have just a couple of introductory comments. We have in last week's Parsha, it says, "Vayakum melech chadash al Mitzrayim shel Yodesh Yosef." A new king, a new Paro arose in Egypt who didn't know Yosef. And then goes on to say, "Vayavidu Mitzrayim es bnei Yisrael beforech," which normally is translated as the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with hard labor. But the Bala Turim has an interesting take on that word beforech, which leads me to the introduction of what we're talking about. We're talking about ultimately the Jewish people were in slavery in Egypt, and then they were redeemed. Slavery really consists of three different kinds of slavery. You can have slavery where the slave master is in fact kind to the slaves, but yet they're slaves. They don't have any free will of their own. You can have a slave master who drives the slaves to really hard work, but other than the hard work, doesn't do any horrible, cruel things to them other than making them work hard. And then you have the third kind of slavery, which is where you not only have the slave master who makes the people makes the slaves work hard, but also treats them cruelly. And the latter is, of course, Paro and Mitzrayim. Paro and Mitzrayim not only made them work hard, but he was killing them at the same time. So how did all this happen? So an interesting take on how this progressed is in the interpretation of the Bala Turim of the word beforech. The word which we translated as hard labor. But you could really, according to the Bala Turim, separate it into two words. And the two words are the perach, with a soft mouth. What the Bala Turim says is, we didn't just, how did the Jewish people all of a sudden end up being slaves? We didn't just one day say, okay, we're going to give up our freedom and we're going to become slaves to you, Paro. But Paro talked to them with a soft voice. He said, let's together build cities. And he kind of lured them in with this soft talk, not to be slaves, but we'll build together. And then, of course, once they started, went downhill from there until they became slaves in body and soul. And the three kinds of slavery that we had in Egypt were a slavery, a physical slavery where you were totally enslaved and worried about your life. The second was, even if you got out of that, you were still enslaved because you still had to do the hard work, even though you didn't have the dangerous part of it. And the third part of the slavery in Egypt was the slavery of the spirit and of the mind. So with that kind of a introduction, let's take a look at what the Netivot Shalom says. And the pasuk says, says, "V'gamani shumati es nakas bnei Yisrael asher Mitzrayim avidim osam." That's course Parisi. God says, "I heard the groaning of the children of Israel, who the Egyptians keep in bondage, and I've remembered my covenant." And it says, "Lachein emor livnei Yisrael." This is where it starts in Netivot Shalom. Ani Hashem, I am God. I will take you out of the burdens of Egypt. I will save you from your work. And I will redeem you, to you with an outstretched arm. Those three things, that refers to getting yourself out of the hardest, cruelest part of the labor, getting Bnei Israel out of the evil decrees that Paro was doing. But the next one, Vitzalti Eschem, Avodosa, means to get you out of the work that you're still having to do as a slave. And then the third, Vitzalti Eschem gets you out of the work. V'goalti then gets you out of the spiritual bondage that you're in. And then the fourth, it says, V'lakachti Eschem li la'am. I will take you to me for a nation. So you have those four words. You have Otseisi, Hitzalti, V'goalti, V'lakachti. And then, a little bit later, it says, Ve'ivesi eschem. V'lakachti means I will take you to me for a people. Then Ve'ivesi eschem el horetz, I'll bring you to the land of Israel. Asher nasasi es yadi l'seiso, so that I have promised to give to you. The pasuk zeh, in this sentence, the Netivot Shalom says, "Nimu arba lishonos shel geula." The four languages of redemption are mentioned. Asher kinegdam tiknu chazal arba kosos b'leil seder. And because of these four languages of redemption, our sages decreed the 4 cups of wine at the seder. That's one interpretation of the reason for the 4 cups of wine. Another is that the word kos, with regard to Paro's cup, was mentioned 4 times. But we're going with what it says here, that this, and this is a more commonly accepted one. It's a hint at the 4 cups of wine. It's the 4 cups of wine to remember these 4 aspects of redemption. There are those that think we should have a 5th cup. Excuse me. To remember that God said he'll bring us to this land of Israel. This is the 5th language of Geula. And of course, many people have a 5th cup. Some use it as the cup of Eliyahu Novi. Some have an additional cup over and above that, but that's the basis for it. And in general, the Masha Torah Kadosh Marichalis Lisporas Yane Golos Gol Misraim. Why is it that the Torah spends so much time talking about the Exodus, first the exile, then the Exodus from Egypt? Bishum Shekol Zeh Nitzchiv. We said many times that the Torah is not a storybook, is not a book of history. We have to, from every line in the Torah, every word, every letter in the Torah, we have to learn something. So this story that the Torah has taken so much time to tell us is eternal and applies to us even today. Parshos Elu, and in these parshot, these sedrot and the shovavim, starting with last week of Shemot, Vaeyra, Bo, B'Shalach, Yitro, Mishpatim, these parshot, Ramazim called Goliot, Sheklal Yisrael over this hints at all of the exiles that Bnei Yisrael are going to go through. Not only Bnei Yisrael as a nation, but call Yachid Yisrael, every individual has these kinds of exiles within him or herself. Kol hamishborim ha'ovrim olav. All of the difficulties that a person goes through, the tests that a person goes through, bechinas galut, and the aspect of being in exile, shu nimtza ba hakol merumaz parsha. We see that everything is hinted at in our Parsha Vaeyra, in these portions of the Torah. So also the four languages of redemption. It's not just that Hashem wanted to give us the message that He's going to redeem us, so He changed the language each time. Once He said "V'otzeisi," then "V'yitzalti," then "V'goalti." They're not meaning the same thing. It's not just changing the language. Each one of them speak about one different aspect of redemption. As it says in the Gemara Yerushalmi in Pesachim, Arba Golot, there were four exiles. The Hine, and we talked about these four exiles before. We talked about last week. We talked about how even in Bereshit, the world was created. It says the world was tohu vavohu, ruach al pi marachefes al hayam. Those referred to the four exiles that we had after Mitzrayim. Those were the exiles: the Babylonian exile, the Persian exile, the Greek exile, and the Roman exile, which is today's exile. So these words hint to all of those things. In the exile of Egypt, as the sages tell us, that with regard to the exile in Egypt, that we were like a fetus in its mother's womb. It was like a fetus that is closed inside of a uterus of the mother, of the animal. It can't move this way or that way. It's completely closed in. Can't move from its place. This is how Bnei Yisrael was in Mitzrayim. They were totally taken in by the hand of the Sitra Achar, meaning the evil forces in the world which were represented by Egypt. And it was with reference to this, remember that Hashem said, I will take you out from under the burdens of Egypt. Sivlos Mitzrayim, the burdens of Egypt, that is like the fetus in the uterus of an animal. Shazu si hasevel gadol b'yoter Yisrael. This is the greatest kind of burden where you're stuck. You can't move one way or the other. And on this it is said, Hashem says, I will bring you out. Shu lashon hotzah b'chazaka means I will bring you out with great strength. Kedevar hamaora b'chaveiro, just as if something that is tightly affixed, attached to another person, and you're trying to separate that person from it. Tzorich akira b'chazaka, you have to use great strength to pull it apart and to separate it. Then he goes on to say, Omnom, gam mi she'enu b'ofen zek ubamei behema b'dei sitracha. Even those who are not in this kind of a situation, they're like the embryo in the uterus. We can't move at all. Nonetheless, they're still stuck in the hands of the Sitra Achar. Even if you're freed out from that totally closed space, you're still in a situation of still doing the things that whoever was enslaved you wanted to do. And that's the introduction I made before. Even when we get out of the actual cruelty of Paro, we still had the mentality we're still slaves. We weren't free yet. So you're still in the grasp. And for that, the second language was said, Itzalti eschem. I brought you out of the first level. Now I'm going to bring you out of the second level. I'm going to bring you out of the level of having to do the hard work at all. Shehem avidim leklipas Mitzrayim osim devorim, because even after the harsh decrees were stopped, they were still slaves. They were still doing the things that the Egyptians wanted them to do. And we know the Torah has warned us. Torah has warned us, Kamase Eretz Mitzrayim lo sasun. Don't do those things that they were doing in Egypt, which refers to not only the forbidden things, but the permitted things that a Jew shouldn't do. Now, as a Jew has to be on a higher level. And just because you're not going to get caught doing something, or because everybody else is doing something, you shouldn't do it. Od inyan haya bagalas Mitzrayim, shorshu akasha shabagalios. There's another aspect of the redemption from Mitzrayim that was really hard to do in the exile. Shoyu mishubadim Mitzrayim, because we were enslaved in Egypt, not just as slaves, but otherwise. As we say in the Haggadah, you brought us out of slavery to freedom, and from this servitude to redemption. In addition to the work that was done in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, we were also enslaved to them in other ways by following their ways, by adopting their practices. That's also a form of slavery. You know, today's idol worship, not many people actually worship a statue or an idol. Today's idol worship is worshiping those things that give you such pleasure that you're going to put everything else aside, all your morals aside, all your integrity aside, to worship the idols of today. As we said, we were enslaved to Paro Mitzrayim. We could think that we weren't doing it by our will. We couldn't do what we wanted to do. We couldn't even groan. We were so enslaved. Body and soul was so enslaved in Mitzrayim that Chalta de Geula, beginning of the exile, the beginning of the redemption, when Hashem heard Bnei Yisrael groaning from the work. But before that, even before that, when they were in the lowest level of slaves, the highest amount of torture and horrible things were happening, they couldn't even groan. They had reached that level. So they had to get out of that level first so we can finally hear their groan. Given their entire being was to serve the evil regime of Egypt. So that was very difficult in its evilness, in its quest for that which is not proper. And because of this, Nemru, the third word, the third of the three words of the four words of Gula, I will redeem you with an outstretched hand. Shtei chalaki hagula harishonim, the two first aspects of the redemption, adayin ein ze geula mamshit, is not yet a complete redemption, is not a complete freeing. Because they were still, as we said in the first two, they're still, their intent, their minds, they're still tangled up with the Egyptians. They're still slaves in that respect. Ratkan Nemar, here's we say, when we get to that third lashon, that third language, I will redeem you. The outstretched arm, to get us out of that, you need a strong arm, a strong outreached arm that can separate us from the attachment. As we said a minute ago, is strongly attached to something else. You have to really have chazak to pull it out. This, going through those first three, Otseisi, Itzalti, V'Goalti, that prepared you for the higher purpose. That Hashem said, I will take you to me for a people. Sheniu Yisrael Hamanivchor, that Bnei Yisrael would be the chosen people. Shizu Shleibus Hagula, this is the perfection, the completion of the redemption. Yatsu Meshus Mitzrayim, to go out of the Rishus, the ownership, the influence of Egypt, and to come into the Rishus, into the ownership, into the domain, if you will, the domain of God. Yos Ama Nivchar Lechelko Nachlos, to be a chosen people for your portion and your inheritance. That's the fourth language. I will take you to me for a people. Bechinas Kiddushin, just like Kiddushin that you do with the woman when you're marrying a woman, when a man's marrying a woman. The Likha hi achas b'shora Kiddushin. Taking is one of the languages of Kiddushin. Why is taking one of the languages of Kiddushin? Because normally it's the man who goes out looking for a woman, for a wife. And he, so to speak, takes her from amidst the other women. So that's why I use the language of taking. It's a language of Kiddushin. And then after that language, you come to a higher level of Hevesi Eschem El Kol Horetz. I bring you to the land. Bechinas Nisuyan. That's the aspect of Nisuyan, of the marriage contract. Basically, you bring the wife to your house. Well, the cost of Eschel Kampi Neshorim, Bavi Eschem Elai, as it says, Hashem said, will bring us on the wings of eagles and bring you to me. This is the ultimate purpose of marriage, to bring the wife into the house, to bring Bnei Yisrael as the Am HaNivchar into the house of God. All of these parts of the redemption from Egypt, this is the order of how the redemption will take place in the future. But more than that, and what's important to us right now, is the Sidre Hagula Shokal Yafi. It's the order of the redemption of each individual. Each of us have to go through that process of first getting out of the most difficult aspect that we're in. And then even though you've gotten out of the particular situation, getting rid of what caused you to remain in that situation that tries to keep you there and makes you susceptible to getting there again. And the third, to finally get rid of that, to have that go behind you, and then come closer to Hashem. Same thing happens to the individual. By Shabbos, an interesting thought. Shabbos mevia geula olam. Shabbos brings redemption to the world. Kol yemos hashavua, every day of the week, they're like exile. But Shabbos, Shabbos is the aspect of redemption. B'chol hashavua shakua Yehudi v'tardosav v'bavolav v'yisro ha'felim, all week long, a Jew is struggling with the struggles and with dark things. You find yourself in Golus. You don't have time. You don't have time to study Torah. You don't have time to do mitzvahs. You're too busy trying to make a living. You're too busy trying to solve the problems of the world instead of working on yourself. You're too busy all week long with all these things. We also have the same levels we talked about before. The deeper, getting out of it a little bit, and then finally getting away from that, and then getting closer to Hashem. Sure, during the week, there are some times, lots of times, that you remember, you think about Hashem, you think about God, you think about the importance of studying Torah. You go to a shir, you pick up a book, you pick up a siddur, you daven, whatever. There are times that you think of Hashem. But so you're not completely in the hands of the dark forces. The bargoim hagavoim shu margis Hashem yisborach harei meshuchar miyad sitracha, because those times that you can feel the presence of God, those are times that you can free yourself from the evil portions, the evil side. Somebody falls to the lowest level of exile. Who's like a fetus in its mother's womb. All week long, you're found in the hands of the Sitra Achar, the negative force, one after the other, continuing without letting up. And you're so enmeshed with it, you get so covered with this that you can't turn one way or the other, just like the fetus in a womb. You're stopped up. And there's an aspect which is a smaller part of exile. There's the aspect of serving and then being enslaved. But for all these things, the good news is that Shabbos brings redemption. Shabbos Kodesh, hu Yom HaGeula L'Klal Yisrael. Holy Shabbos is the day of redemption for all of the people of Israel. L'Chol Prat Yisrael, not only as a nation, but every individual. Shabbos Kodesh, when Shabbos comes, all of L'Tzeis Mihagalus, Bahu Nimtza Kol Hashvua. When Shabbos comes, you have the opportunity to leave the exile that you've been found in all week long. B'Shabbos Kodesh Nichlal Kol Madregos Shagula. And in Shabbos, you have all of these levels of redemption. B'tchila, at the beginning, Kashi Yehudi Nechles Shabbos, when you're going into Shabbos, you're separating yourself from all those things that happen to you during the week. Leave your weekday out of the doors of Shabbos. And you're freeing yourself from all the powers of the evil person, the evil one, the evil power, Sitra Achar, Hasovimos, that encompass you during the week. Depending on the level you're in, it's like the three levels we talked about first. I'll bring you out, I will save you, I will redeem you. And after that, you'll reach the level of I have taken you to me for a people. This is the whole purpose of Shabbos. Shehu Yom Hadvekus B'Hashem. This is the day of cleaving to Hashem, of having this close connection with Hashem. V'Shalashidus, and on Shalashidus, Eis Rava de Ravin. Shalashidus is referred to as Rava de Ravin. Rava de Ravin is the highest level you can reach of being close to Hashem. Shu Yom Hadvekus B'Hashem. It's a day of cleaving to Hashem. It's the day of God connecting with Bnei Yisrael. At that point in Shalashidus of Shabbos, in the third meal, you come to the level I am bringing you to the land, Bechinas Nisuyin, the aspect of marriage, going into the house, bringing your bridegroom, your bride into the house. That's Shalashidus. Some people, unfortunately, don't experience Shalashidus, and they're missing out on something. They're missing out on a big thing. As you can see from what he just said, Rava the Ravin, it is the high point of Shabbos. It's what you're going for. The whole Shabbos to get closer to God. And here in Shalashidus, this third meal, when the Shabbos is starting to wane, that's when you get closest. Rava the Ravin. Avodah Yehudi b'Shabbos Kodesh. The work of a Jew on Shabbos, Mitchila b'Sur Meirah, begins with Sur Meirah. Leave that which is bad behind you. And after you've cleansed yourself of that which is bad, Asay Tov, then do good. Ad Shemagil Madregos Hagvos Piotr, you come to a higher level. Karumas Binyan Shamor V'Zocher B'Dibur Echad. And this is hinted at when we say, in reference to the Dibrot, the first set and the second set. And one of them it says, Shomer es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. The other it says, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. But they were said together. We human beings can't say two words at the same time. Hashem did it. Hashem can. What does that mean? So Shomer is a Shabbos who lo saseh. That means that's the things you should not do. Those are the negative commandments. Shinyanu sur meirah. That's the aspect of turning away from that which is bad, turning away from that which is prohibited. To free yourself from all things that are contrary to Torah. That you're enslaved to all the days of the week. The Zocher and the second lashon, remembrance. Shomer is to keep. Zocher is to remember. Who mitzvahs asay. That's the positive commandment. Shinyanu asay tov, the aspect of doing good. The Kabbalah is orot for kedushas of Shabbos, to receive the light and the holiness of Shabbos. Uvazeh yesh lanu astira, and there's a seems to be a contradiction. As the Admor of the Beis Avram asked, In one place, in Yerushalmi and Masechet Tanis, Amr Chazal, the sages say, Ilmolei Shomer Shabbos Achat Miyad Nigalim. If only the Jewish people would keep one Shabbos, right away they would be redeemed. Another place, Amr in the Gemara Shabbos, it says, Ilmolei Shomer Shabbos Shtei Shabbosos Miyad Nigalim. If Bnei Yisrael only keep two Shabbatot, they'll be redeemed. It sounds contradictory. What is it? One or two? They seem to be contradicting each other. Yesh Lomar Kavana, and the intention of this is the Shtei Avichinos, the aspects shel Shabbos of Shabbos. What are the two aspects of Shabbos? Zachar v'Shomer. The Zachar v'Shomer, remembering and keeping. Shtei Shabbosos, Shehein Achas. Those are two Shabbosos that are really one, because on one Shabbos you are remembering to do what is good, and you are keeping yourself from doing what is bad. Zochar v'Shomer. Inyan Shabbos shel sur meira, the aspect of Shabbos of leaving evil, let's say to go out of the domain of the negative forces. Inyan Shabbos shel aseh tov, and the aspect of Shabbos of doing good. Likanis legamrei l'chus hagdush, to go completely into the domain of holiness. V'yachtov heim, and together, shleimut shel Shabbos achas, that's the perfection of one Shabbos. The Zochar v'Shomer b'dibur echad, because they were both said in one word, Zochar and Shomer. Umar on Admor is a Chazalei Perish from Ramah Chazal. He says what Chazal say, Shema Tomer Laratchem ani nosin lechem es Shabbos. If you think I'm giving you Shabbos to give something bad to you, no, I'm giving you Shabbos only for your good. You know, unfortunately, some people who don't understand Shabbos think that, it's so restrictive. I can't drive, I can't talk on the phone, I can't use my cell phone, I can't go to movies, I can't do this, can't do that. No, they're missing the point. Shabbos is given for our good. How can you even think that Shabbos was given to do something bad to you? And he knows it's Shabbos, that God gave us Shabbos for bad. Hey, what this means is Shema Tomer. You might say, the Raschem Hainu Shetachlis Shabbos Hila Kora Tara. You might think that maybe what it means is the whole purpose of Shabbos was to get rid of the evil. No, that's an aspect of it. But I only gave you Shabbos for your good. Shetachlis Hasur Meira, who Gam came, the whole purpose of turning away and doing good is to reach this level of goodness. Madrego Hal Yonah Shel Shabbos Kodesh, to reach the highest level of the Holy Shabbos. Shiva Lakachti Eschem Li La'am, that I will bring you to me for a nation. V'hevisi Eschem, I will bring you to the land of Eretz Yisrael. B'chinas Ula Shalema, and the aspect of the complete redemption. And all of this that applies, as he said, all of this that applies to Bnei Yisrael as a whole can apply to each of us individually. If we just look at our own individual matzav, our individual position in life, and see how we can improve it, and work to improve it at the various levels, depending on how badly we are enmeshed with worldly matters that are keeping us from serving God. That's how hard we have to work. As the Gemara says, you are rewarded in accordance to the pain that you have. That's how you're rewarded. The common phrase is "no pain, no gain." You have to go through these things to get rid of these things, and then you'll have tremendous gain. That's it. That concludes the Netivot Shalom Shir. Let's hope that since we are talking about these Arba Lashonos of Geula, that we are, and I know we are, really at the point where Hashem is going to bring the final Geula to Bnei Yisrael, to each of us individually, and to the world, make a better world. Thank you for listening. I will, before I start the recording, if there's any questions, comments, I'll take them before I stop recording. Otherwise, I'll stop recording, and then you can make any questions or comments. But I'm going to stop the recording.